And now I introduce Duccio Bonifazzi, the first presentation on the EPTRI conceptual design. Duccio is the chair of the Gianni Benzi Pharmacological Research Foundation, and he is leading the work package 4 of the EPTRI project, dedicated to design the organization of the new research infrastructure. So his presentation will be on EPTRI organization of services, data, and access. Thank you, Duccio.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So the previous speakers have introduced and explained the landscape for the pediatric research. Now we are entering in the description of the organization of the EPTRI research infrastructure. Where we will consider and discuss later in this session the adopted model for the infrastructure, the tools supporting the users, and the organization of the services, how they have been identified, and how users will have access to the services. So we start with the first slide. EPTRI has adopted from the beginning an hub and spoke model in which all the research units are connected to the central hub, grouped in the 4 thematic research platform, or on another, let's say, parallel level, grouped by country in the national EPTRI infrastructures. All the users, all the actors in the research infrastructures, next slide, will be supported by an IT platform, which will allow users to interact with each other and with the external environment that is made of stakeholders and other research infrastructure. So the system will allow governance and management bodies, service providers, customers to access the system, make the request for services, and provide the services. They will also be allowed to use services provided by external infrastructures or work with the other existing infrastructure for the provision of the common services that we will see later on. Next slide. We have been talking of services. All the services have been identified and designed based on the analysis of the existing gaps that have been collected and identified, performing surveys among the potential users of the infrastructures. Next one. All the services have been can be categorized in 3 main groups that are the integrated services, the centralized, and the common services. Next one. The integrated services are those to be provided by the research units that have been grouped by thematic research platform. We have identified and designed the Pediatric Medicine Discovery Platform, which puts together 82 research units from 19 countries, the Pediatric Biomarkers and Biosamples platform with 78 research units in 22 countries, the Developmental Pharmacology platform with 28 research units from 12 countries, and the Pediatric Medicines Formulation platform with 28 research units and 12 countries. All the platform will be described in details by the next speaker, so we'll move on with next slide and the next again. All the centralized services are those that are provided centrally by the Central Management Office and through the single access point. Next one. These services are those that have been designed to support users and to provide several services that include the availability of a document and data repository and of an e-library that are used not only to provide a repository for data and documents, but also to facilitate the sharing and the reuse of the knowledge produced by EPTRI, obviously taking into account any IPR issue with the users who asked for the service. EPTRI will also provide educational content through programs based on e-learning and other training activities, again to disseminate all the knowledge and facilitate research. Next one. Among the centralized services, we have including the provision of support in scouting and applying for funding opportunities. Alex has just presented what we can expect from the next program, and EPTRI is offering its help to the users in selecting the best option. We will provide research project management for funded project to facilitate and to support users in achieving the objective of the proposal. Next one. And EPTRI will also provide advice both on the design and requirements of not clinical specific studies and experiments, and on the innovation pathway for specific products, and on clinical phases, so to facilitate the translation of EPTRI results into pediatric clinical research and products at the end of the process. Next one. The third category of services is the one that relates with the services to be provided in collaboration with existing research infrastructure. During the past period, 2 years, we have been able to identify two areas for which we have created strong links and connection with BBMRI to provide ethical and legal advice on EPTRI areas of interest, and with Elixir to facilitate sharing and reuse of data according to the FAIR principles, creating a service for pediatric data interoperability. However, we have several other, next slide, research infrastructures with which we have already identified possible areas for designing new common services, and a table summarizing this exercise is presented in the next slide. Yes, this one, where we listed the specific research areas and services that EPTRI is willing to deliver, the platform involved in the delivery of those services, and the list of existing research infrastructures that already provide similar services, but that can benefit from a pediatric approach, so to be able to design new common services. Next one. Once we have identified the services to be provided, we had also to identify the method for providing those services. And this will be done through a single access point, providing the single point of access, to all the services, so to facilitate the interactions of EPTRI with its users, a service desk providing support in a fast and accurate way in case of any need of the users, and a user guide explaining and presenting the services and the tools designed and implemented to support the provision of the services. The provision of the services will be done according to a well-defined and clear and transparent procedure made of several steps, in which an application is received through the single access point, it is evaluated, a feedback is collected, the assessment of the request is done inside EPTRI, then there is a selection of the providers, the admission, the negotiation, the setting up of the service provision, and the continuous monitoring. Next one. Next again. The process for providing the services is better explained in this table, where we can see the service request that arrives through the single access point is managed at the central management office and its secretariat. Then we have identified a user selection panel, which is composed of the advisory board's external members that will be in charge for assessing the excellence, the relevance, and if the request is in scope with EPTRI or not. In case of a positive assessment, the Access Management Committee, working in collaboration with the internal partners, will consider the feasibility of the request and will make a proposal for the providers able to provide the service. Once this first step is completed, the Access Management Committee will report to the Executive Board, which will provide approval for going on with the process, and according to the type of service, if it is to be provided in collaboration with an existing research infrastructure or internally by EPTRI, we will have a contract negotiation managed by the Common Management Office on the left in case of a common service, or based on a service agreement to be signed with the internal service providers. The Central Management Office will be able to negotiate the contract with the users, and once the contract is approved, the service will be provided. Next one. Next again. At the end of the service, all the data resulting from the execution of the service, as well any other data produced or collected by EPTRI, will need to be managed according to a data management plan that has been already drafted as a deliverable of the EPTRI project, and which contains information on the type of data to be produced or collected, the standards and the tools to be used for managing the data, the verification principle, the allocation resources, and all the ethical aspects related to the management of the data. Next one. We have identified several data sources, which are the collection of information from the research units participating in EPTRI as users or service providers. This is needed to map the research units and allow the selection of the providers, for example. Then we will have to manage all the data relating to the networking and outreach activities that EPTRI will perform during its life, all the coordination, management, and other central lab activities. And the fourth category is the one of the data resulting from the provision of research services. Next one. For all these data, we have identified their main attributes and the commitment of EPTRI, also in line with the European Commission regulations, and Alex just presented in his a few minutes ago this point, will be exploited or shared or anyway made accessible, making extensive use of the European Open Science Cloud for data sharing, considering the FAIR principle, the compliance with the GDPR, and obviously any intellectual property right issue to safeguard the commercial rights of the users asking for EPTRI support. And the next one is the last. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Duccio. Very clear explanation of the way EPTRI will work. As we did for the first session, we will have all the presentations now, and at the end we will have the discussion. All the speakers of this second session are already with their microphone on, so they are already allowed to intervene, but we prefer not to interrupt the presentations. So now we have the presentations of the 4 technology research platforms that have been designed within EPTRI in the context of the conceptual design report. There are 4 speakers, of course. They are representing the coordination of these 4 technology research platforms. So I will start with Emanuel Mikros from Athena Research and Innovation Center, who is leading within the EPTRI project the medicine discovery pediatric technology research platform. Please, Emanuel, go.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, very well, please.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I will present, as Donato said, about the pediatric medicines discovery platform. I will begin, next slide, please. I will begin with the mission of this platform, which is to offer access to academic drug discovery facilities in Europe, to coordinate efforts among European Center of Excellence in order to provide these integrated services. And finally, we hope to accelerate discovery and drug development in pediatrics by implementing cutting-edge technologies. Next slide. The last 40 years, you have seen by Dimitrios Athanasiou in the previous session a similar slide. The last 40 years, well-known and specific milestones have been established in drug discovery. You can see them. They can be summarized by dividing them in preclinical and clinical trials. I have also put here in the upper part also to underline the effort of these initial phases, the first 2 phases of drug discovery, that you can see in order to have a final drug in therapeutics, at least 10,000 molecules should be synthesized and tested in the initial steps. Next slide, please. The first phase of drug discovery, also usually called as R&D, consists also of specific steps related to target identification, validation, and then beginning the screening and lead hit identification first, and hit to lead optimization, and Then we go to the next phase. Next slide, please. Which is related mainly to animal studies. And again, we have the lead to candidate mainly discussing, studying the efficacy and safety on animals, but also dealing with administration, formulation, quality control, and other issues related to drugs before getting to clinical trials. Next slide. In this slide, I copy from a big pharma, where you can see that during all these first steps, the need of technologies like protein production, assay development, high throughput screening of millions of compounds, libraries of molecules, chemical libraries containing, again, millions of compounds, a lot of chemistry, and a lot of effort to understand the physicochemical properties, pharmacokinetics, etc., etc. Next slide. In this slide, we gather all different technologies needed in preclinical phase of drug discovery. We have divided in 6 groups of technologies, and you can see that we have the target identification, the high throughput screening, all the informatics related to support the efforts, the medicinal chemistry and the related efforts, and finally the cell-based assays and animal experimental pharmacology. The same principles outlined for drug discovery in adults are applied to pediatric drug discovery, yet with several key differences. The unique characteristics in pediatric therapeutics offers a framework for identifying gaps in discovery, drug discovery and development, and I hope that it demonstrates the necessity of a dedicated platform, research platform in the European Union. Next slide. Through our efforts in EPTRI, the last 2 years, we believe that we identified gaps that are related mainly to the understanding of mechanisms of diseases which are different in children and adults. This comparison can give the opportunity to establish targets specific to pediatric patients. We know that pediatric diseases are quite often multifactorial, so we need polypharmacology approaches and multi-targeting. In that sense, new targets related to the specific pediatric disease phenotype and developmental stage is paramount and presents a challenging domain with great potential for innovation and contribution to children therapeutics. Next slide. Next slide, please. In the same no, the previous, please. Okay. In the same context, most existing disease models are inadequate to capture the unique developmental status of pediatric patients. Whether we are talking about cell models or animal models, specific disease models are needed. And we have to pinpoint here that personalized medication approaches in pediatrics are not widely exploited at present. Taking always into account, it has been mentioned already that the pediatric diseases are categorized quite often as rare diseases. Precision medicine technologies specifically related to pediatric patients should be used. Next slide. So as I said, the last 2 years, the EPTRI efforts pulled together information in European level for a unique collection of disease-specific cell models, like, as you can see, dystrophies, cancer, neurological, etc. And more importantly, the existence of state-of-the-art technologies applied on pediatric problems like 3D cell cultures, microtissue products, stem cells, and patient-derived models. Next slide. The most important, I think, is the unique collection of animal models specific for pediatric diseases. I have put some of them here. You can see mice specific for, let's say, progeria, for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, for hypoxia, for oncology, etc., etc. Zebrafish, murine models, and so on and so forth. Next slide. So having all these, identifying all these possibilities, EPTRI platform aims to provide services first in target validation. We are able to provide services for the validation of a target through genetic approaches like silencing RNA, antisense, knockout, etc. The characterization, the purification, expression, purification of the targets, the structural characterization of the targets, and also by synthesizing chemical probes specific for the targets and all the bioinformatics related to target validation. Next slide, please. Then the most important, I think, and as I said, is the unique collection of cell and animal models. So in cell models, we can use specific disease models for screening, and this is very important for the drug discovery part, but also creating new models using all the different cutting edge technologies like patient-derived cells, pluripotent stem cells, organoids from 3D cultures, microfluidics for organ on a chip, gene editing for transforming specific proteins. Next slide. The animal models is the unique collection of animal models, I think, is the big advantage of EPTRI platform for the drug discovery. I mentioned already a lot. You can see some more zebrafish and rodent, but also Drosophila flies, rabbits, etc., etc., specific for pediatric diseases. Next slide. These animal models can be used. Next slide, please. Not only for assays of the new molecular entities that has been discovered in the previous stages, and you can see in the upper right part that zebrafish is one of the technologies that is very important for this type of screening, but also in bigger animals for pharmacokinetics, for metabolism, also for toxicity issues, and of course for studying the disease properly. Next slide. We can also provide services for in silico studies, of course, for virtual screening of large libraries, for the design and optimization of molecules in chemoinformatics, for the physicochemical properties related to activity, to absorption, metabolism, and toxicity. All of them can be, we are able to provide services in all these issues. Next slide. You can see here that there are more than 80 centers of excellence in whole Europe, coordinated. We have already the consent of all these centers to provide services to European researchers, both from academia and from pharma companies. Next slide. We would like to mention that we know already that there are different, like these ITCC it has been mentioned already in the previous session. It is not something, next slide, it is not something that we compete with. We collaborate with this type of efforts. We hope that EPTRI could cover more than, you can see that this platform is specific for cancer. EPTRI aspires to cover all different pediatric diseases. Next slide. In our SWOT analysis, we believe that we have the science. We have also there is a gap, and has been mentioned. It is clear that there is a gap in pediatric drug discovery. So there is an opportunity, but it's not only an opportunity; it's an ethical obligation for our children. The actual situation it is that all these center of excellence and technologies are fragmented. EPTRI would give the part of the solution. We hope the whole solution by coordinating them. The threat, of course, is funding and sustainability. We believe that pediatric drug discovery represents a challenging domain with great potential for innovation and contribution to public health. Next slide. And by combining basic and applied research over a multitude of interdisciplinary fields spanning from bioinformatics and developmental biology to advanced animal models, we believe that EPTRI, a discovery platform, will facilitate drug development, focusing on pediatric population and not through the extrapolation from studies on adults. The vision finally is to reverse the existing unacceptable situation where pediatricians divide by a numerical factor the dose of the drug developed for adults and give to our children the therapies they observe. And we believe that this can be done as we said, pediatric diseases are rare diseases and sustainability needs a lot of effort. So we believe that EPTRI, through EPTRI, we will develop a new quadruple helix structure where government, academia, industry, and citizens will work together hand in hand. And with that, in the next slide, I will thank you.
Okay, Emmanuel, very clear explication of these first basic platforms for the development of EPTRI. So I would go directly to the second one, So the presentation on the pediatric biomarkers and biosamples technology research platform will be done by Marios Philaktides.
Hello, can you hear me?
Cyprus Institute of Neurology and Genetics. So please, Marios, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi, hello. So I'm going to talk about the Pediatric Biomarkers and Biosamples platform, whose whose aim is basically the identification and development of pediatric biomarkers to make them available for the development of pediatric drugs. So why the need for pediatric biomarkers? Biomarkers have an enormous potential to provide patient care by establishing tests for diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment effects. And in the last 20 years, lots of different biomarkers have been developed, but these are mainly for adults. The development of pediatric-specific biomarkers is still essential for a number of reasons. First, because pathogenesis of diseases is often quite different in children compared to adults, and also because some diseases are unique to children and have no close adult correlates. Another critical fact is the consideration that children are still growing and developing, which impacts many factors and systems from organ function to drug disposition and clinical response to therapy. Additionally, expression of some genes changes during growth and development, so genotype-phenotype relationships based on existing adult data may not necessarily hold true in children until an adult pattern of gene expression is reached. So making deductions about the utility of validated adult biomarkers in pediatric populations without additional investigation of the biomarkers' role in children can be problematic. So can go back to the previous slide, please. As the above points indicate, there is a need for validated pediatric-specific biomarkers for the care of pediatric patients. There are many hurdles, however, that make biomarker research in pediatric patients additionally difficult. Diseases in children usually have lower prevalence and incidence rates than adults, and children therefore present a smaller and more heterogeneous populations from which to obtain samples for biomarker discovery and validation. Patients are usually distributed among several centers, making the coordinated efforts a challenging necessity. And additional hurdles include trickier bioethical considerations compared to adults that have to do with research involving pediatric subjects and samples. And also there is a reluctance from the, in many cases, from the part of the parents to expose their children to the potential discomfort of participating in research activities. Next slide, please. So the path for biomarker development from discovery to clinical validation is relatively well established, and the transition of a biomarker from discovery to clinical application demands high quality discovery research and high quality clinical studies for biomarker validation. Appropriate study design and accurate statistical methodologies are important, as well as the need for high quality standardized samples obtained using rigorous SOPs. The samples need to be accurately phenotyped and accompanied by the necessary clinical data. Also, appropriate numbers of patients and controls are needed to provide the power for the validation studies. The use of correct technology platforms with appropriate bioinformatics analysis is key. Omics and imaging facilities are important tools in this discovery process, especially at the early stages. Also, it's important to control for biological, operator, different center and reagent effects in order to distinguish between signals and background. And also, biomarkers developed for clinical use require assays which are simple to perform. And on top of these, there are issues about IP protection and the need for establishing commercial partnerships, which researchers must keep in mind. So the next slide, please. So in order to get a better idea of what the needs of research groups working in the field of pediatric biomarker development are, the EPTRI questionnaire was utilized in a similar fashion to the other three thematic platforms. And some of the resources indicated by the responders in the questionnaire as being unavailable to them were technical resources, laboratory facilities, access to the high quality samples that we mentioned, and biobanking facilities, lack of access to animal facilities and models, having little knowledge about ethical and regulatory issues, little access to IT and biostatistics facilities, and also lack of access to omics platforms. Next slide, please. But also through the same questionnaire, we're able to identify the facilities that were available within the responder groups. And what was seen was that many of the responders were actually carrying out identification and characterization analysis research on biomarkers, and they were proceeding through the validation processes. Many of them had biobanks in operation, which included biosamples of pediatric interest. Some of them, a small number, had biobanks exclusively dedicated to pediatric samples, and a larger number of them had biobank sections which were dedicated to pediatric biosamples. And also, many of these responders were interested in making their facilities available to the future EPTRI research infrastructure. However, this first questionnaire was rather general, did not go into much depth. So a second follow-up survey was performed in order to get more details about the facility and capacity potentially available for utilization within this future infrastructure. So next slide, please. A follow-up questionnaire was sent to groups and organizations that express interest in participating in the future EPTRI research in infrastructure. And this questionnaire was asking more information about facilities available for the infrastructure. So what we are looking at the results from 22 responders, but more have replied since, and additional countries have been added to the list of 11 countries that are shown in these slides. So what showed was that omics platforms were available in many countries and of many different types of omics platforms, and the bioinformatics services for the analysis of the omics data and other complex data were available. As you saw before, biobanks were available in 14 institutions, and mainly the materials stored were serum plasma cells, and in some cases more specialized samples were stored, and these were used were available both for research and diagnostics, and the samples there span a wide spectrum of ages. Many of the facilities had animal models of pediatric diseases, and they had facilities that were capable of carrying out research on fetal and juvenile animals, and this included mouse, rat, rabbits, fish, and pigs as animals models. Next slide, please. many had established in vitro models of human development for studying. They had access or had established embryonic stem cells. They were using iPS cells and organoids. They had facilities for imaging pediatric subjects, and they were using many of the techniques important in biomarker identification and characterization. For example, protein arrays, cytogenetic techniques, analysis of metabolic intermediates and secreted proteins, and also some of the responders indicated their expertise in ethical and regulatory aspects relating to biomarker validation for regulatory purposes, and also had expertise in the sharing of human data and biosamples for research activities, and expertise in GDPR matters. Next slide, please. So the services to be offered by this platform were based on the results of the surveys, and they fall into two main categories. The first category refers to facilitating access to pediatric biological samples, either in the existing biobanks of the participants or collected specifically for the purposes of particular projects. And the second group of activities refer to research activities aimed at identifying biomarkers that are of high pediatric interest, mainly biomarkers that are either transcripts, DNA variants, proteins, and metabolites, using mainly omics technologies, providing the bioinformatics support for the analysis of these data, and also performing verification in pediatric samples of the presence and levels of biomarkers that have been previously identified in adult samples. And this last group of services it will be offered as transnational activities in the Infra-A proposal already submitted by EPTRI. So next slide, please. So if we look at the outline of the platform, it's quite a simple outline. There are three main types of players. There are the users, there are the hospitals, and with the doctors for provision of medical expertise, and also access to samples and patients, and the distributed core facilities which are carrying the omics and imaging activities. All these three, the three users can come together to work on the project design at the beginning of the project. Then through the activity of hospitals and clinics and other facilities which have access to samples, the biosamples can be collected, or they can be identified in their biobanks. Additional extra samples which are not needed for the needs of the experiments can be stored in biobanks. If these are not available, then with the help of BBMRI, this can be established so that they adhere to the standards and guidelines of BBMRI, and also BBMRI can help with SOPs for sample collection depending on downstream processes. So following the processing and analysis of the sample by distributed core facilities, the results can be made available to the users. Also, the core facilities can carry out basic research, and they can provide laboratory training and methods and guidelines if the users need them. Regulatory support and LC support is something to be provided centrally rather than through this platform. Next slide, please. So there's a large number of partners involved in this platform. So some of them, and they're shown here. And that's the last slide. So next slide, just to say thank you.
Thank you, Marius. Thanks a lot for this
Thank you
excellent
very much.
presentation. Now we have the third thematic research platform on developmental pharmacology. It will be presented by Tessa van der Geest from Radboud University. Thank you, Tessa. The ground is yours.
Well, thank you. Yes, within the EPTRI project, we worked on the development of the thematic platform on developmental pharmacology, and we did this together with Evelyn. She's on the line as well, probably. Alice, Miriam, Saskia, and myself, being the work package 17 within the project. So next slide, please. So the developmental pharmacology platform is focusing on the stimulation of pediatrics within basic research up to the point where patients are getting involved. So this aims to create a bridge between basic research and clinical drug development within pediatrics. So as you all might know, is that once new drug candidates have been selected, the extrapolation of adult data to establish pediatric doses is limited by age-related variation in the biological processes that are involved in the disposition and the effect of the drug. So this is not only challenging in case of new drugs, but also for drugs that are already on the market and for which pediatric data are often very limited. So to address these challenges, as we call them, the field of developmental pharmacology plays an important role in closing the information gaps, and especially the ones that are relevant to the pharmacodynamics and the pharmacokinetics. So within the platform, we aim to provide transnational access, which include that we will provide access to researchers from academics as well as from industry to the research infrastructures that we work in, to enable the support of studies underpinning optimal pediatric dose selection. And this ranges from laboratories providing access to elucidate the age-related variation in ADME and target genes, the development of physiologically based and population-based PKPD models addressing and elucidating the ontogeny, for instance, the development of sensitive analytical assays, as well as microdosing studies. So next slide, please. So within the EPTRI project, as was also mentioned in the presentations before, the needs within the translational research were analyzed partly by the surveys that were done, and were used to develop these 4 thematic research platforms. So within the field of developmental pharmacology, it was found that there's a need for the capacity to support the underlying science, which was needed for the clinical drug evaluation, and that it should involve multiple expert and competences from different players such as pharmacologists, chemists, toxicologists, pharmacometricians, but also regulatory experts, well, in order to elucidate the impact of growth and maturation on pharmacology, as well as to gain specific knowledge on pediatric drug disposition and response in different pediatric age groups. So based on this, the platform on developmental pharmacology can help to raise awareness of the innovations that were made and advocate their use in clinical drug evaluation for the benefit of the children. And that will be done by providing the access to combined pediatric expertise and technology through the platform. So next slide, please. So, well, to build a platform and to build a sustainable framework which enables access and which enables the service provision that we would like to provide. There were the survey also identified expert centers that are focusing on the translational discovery and validation of the drug, as well as human development and developmental basic science. So, well, as I said, the methodology of finding these centers and selecting these centers was partly based on the EPTRI surveys that were done, but also on the expertise of the members of the EPTRI consortium, so all the individual players within the consortium, who shared their thoughts regarding the centers on the list, as well as the centers that were missing from the initial list. So we know this list is not exhaustive, but it provides information on the selected expert centers and key experts in the field of the developmental pharmacology in Europe, and it's a start to map all their specific expertise. And well, it includes a list of total of the 28 units Duccio also presented in 11 different European countries. So that's a good map to start with, we think. So we can continue to the next slide. So based on the needs that were found within the survey, certain service areas were identified, which are shown here. So, for instance, to establish in vivo pharmacokinetic profiles of new drugs, innovations like microdosing need to be further developed, and their accessibility should be increased. Additionally, to support the first in-child dosing recommendations, our understanding of ADME and pharmacodynamics during maturation should be improved, which will be accomplished by the development of innovative modeling and simulation tools. And to further increase our knowledge on the different maturational processes that influence developmental pharmacology, we will take advantages from toxicity, juvenile, and developmental animal studies, which were also mentioned in the previous presentations, as well as the use of sensitive analytical methods adapted to pediatrics. So next slide, please. So in order to provide EPTRI services via the Developmental Pharmacology platform, we need the facility as shown on the map. So we will provide access to their specific techniques and their specific activities. However, we will not be able to provide all thinkable services that they could provide during the first preparatory phase of EPTRI. So we needed to downsize and start with a selection of services that could be provided properly. So to select the specific services, we choose services which are ready to be provided and from which we can promise high quality results as we proceed in the development of EPTRI. And we can expand on this later on in the process. So we decided with the provision of transnational access in the services that are shown here. So ADME, the modeling and simulation part, small sample analysis, and microdosing. So next slide, please. So these selected services will be coordinated by expert centers with experience in the specific service area, but also with experience in European collaborations. So they are experienced in different EU projects, but also they have a long-standing expertise in the field and collaborate with multiple networks and infrastructures. For instance, with the BBMRI and EPTRI, which were also mentioned by Marius and Duccio already. And this makes them part of the unique infrastructure within Europe and makes them very much of added value during the building phase of the EPTRI infrastructure. So, for instance, the University of Leuven, which is KUL, their main research goal of the drug delivery and disposition group is to develop and apply strategies to achieve predictable, enhanced, and reproducible drug exposure, including perinatal and in the pediatric settings. So this unit is really strong in merging in vitro and pharmacometric expertises combined with the expertise of clinical pharmacology. They have specific expertises which will be very helpful, but depends on the specific request that we will get. So the services they provide now are, for instance, biorelevant profiling of intestinal drug absorption, as well as in-house consulting on the dosing regimen exposure response relationship of drugs within pediatrics, of course. For instance, of APHP in Paris, where Evelyn is working, regarding the small sample analysis, they have a GLP certified facilities with experience and a lot of expertise at both the medical and technical levels to develop very small volume analytical methods in biological fluids, as well as in cells, to confirm and quantify the trace components in complex samples. And there are more of such facilities in Europe, but the combination of the facilities with their specific pediatric expertise is unique and very, very valuable for this platform. As for the microdosing studies, Radboud UMC has a lot of expertise, including the regulatory requirements, but also a very broad collaboration with different partners within the Netherlands, which shows that for some studies you need some collaboration. So what they do, they have collaboration with TNO, which provides the radio-labeled products to do the microdosing, as well as with the medical center in Amsterdam, which have the very sensitive LCMS facilities to measure the ultra-low concentration needed within this study. So it's not only the clinical expertise that's needed, but also the more technical part. So they are together able to manufacture the GMP grade formulations for the pediatric trial and to do the measurements. And this is actually the only standing pediatric microdose facility in Europe offering this combined as well as the separated services, which makes them of added value for this platform, and why we chose these centers to start with. But of course, for all the services, these centers will coordinate the service provision, and they are able to provide services. However, we will need close collaboration with the selected expert centers as shown on the map as well. And this collaboration will be actively sought as well. So next slide, please. So, well, to provide services, we need to work via the EPTRI workflow, and we will contribute to this actively. So this slide describes the workflow for the next phase, in which the specific requests for services will come in and will be selected. So first of all, we will need to describe the specific services that we will provide. Well, we know that partly now, but we will do that more extensively soon. And it will be within the major service areas, of course. So next, then we will contribute to the EPTRI process of access and support the organization of the transnational active service requests. So then we have to collaborate with all the other platforms as well. And of course, we will have to develop a process to enable selection of appropriate requests that can be handled within the EPTRI infrastructure, because not all the questions can be answered maybe within the infrastructure. So we need to get a kind of checklist for which the request must have. So after this process is in place, we will draft and distribute a call describing the availability of the services and the possibility to send in the request from within Europe and disseminate this as well. So next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So the call will be disseminated to publicize the services by the use of, well, internet, of course, using the website of EPTRI, our own website, presentations at scientific meetings, and social media outlets from EPTRI, but also maybe from other involved partners. So call for the proposals will be posted and distributed amongst the EPTRI network respondents, as well as through the learned societies. And then we will look at the requests that will be submitted and select appropriate requests. And finally, we will provide our high quality services. And next slide, please. So of course, we aim to learn, and we will share experience, and in order to do so properly, we will report on our services, the processes and the results of the call, as well as the provision of, well, probably annual overview of the received and selected requests, the number of users, and also the access units. And of all selected proposals, we will provide scientific highlights in collaboration with the requester, resulting from the which are resulting from the provided services, and describe the added value of these services. So hopefully we will be successful in doing this and able to expand the number of services and grow as an infrastructure along the way. And of course, we hope to increase the quality of the translational research within pediatrics, using these services, and allow the improved access to these services as well. So next slide, and that just leaves me with thanking you for your attention and wishing you a very good meeting this afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Tessa. So really a lot of contents, and time is never enough. I'm sorry, but we are going on with the fourth presentation on the pediatric medicines formulations thematic research platform by Elisa Alessandrini from University College of London. So Elisa, the ground is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Donato. So as mentioned, I'm talking about the thematic research platform on pediatric medicine formulations. Next slide, please. So this platform is dedicated to formulation activities that are aimed at creating suitable and tailored medicine for children in a timely and efficient manner. To do this, the platform will be organized in the expertise of the platform will be organized in service packages, and it will match then a user with experts able to provide the services. And the ultimate goal of the platform is to facilitate and accelerate the development of age-appropriate formulations by providing and using innovative technologies. Next slide, please. In particular, the focus of this platform is on these four research activities. These are pre-formulation capabilities, formulation development, assessment of drug delivery systems, and palatability. Next slide, please. In this map, you can see the distribution of the research activities and the distribution of the research institutions that will be that are able to perform these activities and that have agreed to collaborate with EPTRI. The research activities here are represented in different colors, as you can see from the legend below. And a total of 28 research units from 25 different institutions across 12 different countries are declared to have expertise in pediatric medicine formulations. And as you can see, these are evenly distributed across Europe. Next slide, please. So here is just to give you some examples of the type of research activities that these research units are performing. So in terms of pre-formulation capabilities, some research units can offer technologies for drug substance characterization, solubility enhancement, or accelerated stability. In terms of formulation development, research units are able to work on a large variety of compounds, both for conventional and biologics. And so they're able to prepare different types of dosage forms, both for enteral and non-enteral routes of administration. In terms of assessment of drug delivery systems, some research units can offer modified release profile, for example, target delivery systems, example, such as colon-specific delivery systems or delivery systems for biologics with nanotechnologies. And finally, regarding palatability, so there are research units that have equipment for in vitro palatability assessment, for example, the use of electronic tongues, and research units that have that can conduct animal-based or human-based assays, and other research units that can perform palatability assessments with human panels. Next slide, please. So here you can see listed the services that will be provided by this research platform. These are pre-formulation advice and pre-formulation studies, formulation of drug for pediatric use for enteral route of administration, formulation of drug for pediatric use for non-enteral route of administration, pediatric in vitro and in vivo palatability assessment, and assessment and design of drug delivery systems for enteral and non-enteral routes of administration. Now, these services are related to the 4 research activities that I mentioned before. And to give you an example of the service that could be provided, if we take, for example, the service, the formulation of drugs for pediatric use for enteral or non-enteral route of administration, the service could be the identification of suitable dosage form for children and the identification of appropriate methods for the preparation of these dosage forms. In the pie chart, you can see the numbers of research units that can provide each service. And well, as you can see, there are some services in which there are more research units able to provide the service compared to others. Next slide, please. In terms of the platform operational workflow, so this is similar to what was, of course, mentioned before. So when a user will need a specific service or services, so they will have to submit a detailed description of the service to the central management office of the central lab. The central management office will provide all a single access point to all the services, and once the request of the user has been received, the central management office will process and collect all the information that are needed for the subsequent evaluation. The evaluation is performed by the Access Management Committee that includes the platform leaders. So they will evaluate the excellence, the relevance of the request, and if the request is in scope with EPTRI, and then also the relation of the request with a specific service. And finally, the potential research units or potential providers will be identified to provide the service to the user. In terms of timelines, the proposed services will become gradually available depending on the readiness of the service providers. And there will be agreement in place between the user and the central management office to define the criteria for the provision of the service. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, so this platform will offer expertise and activities related to pediatric medicine formulation through participating research units. These potential service providers, so these units have a good geographical distribution across Europe. And all these services that will be provided fall under 4 main research activities. And all these services will be delivered through the EPTRI platform, so to facilitate and enable a timely and efficient formulation for age-appropriate and more suitable medicine for children. And well, yeah, next slide, please. And thank you for listening.
Thanks a lot, Elisa, for this very good presentation. So this was the last of the 4 presentations on the EPTRI technology research platforms that have been already designed, as you have seen, with several research units participating in each of them and specifying several different services that they are ready to offer.